The moment I saw her standing at the gate with another man's family behind her, laughing like they had just returned from a perfect vacation, something inside me didn't break. It went completely silent. Not rage, not tears, just a hollow stillness, like the part of me that loved her had quietly packed its bags and left before I even realized what was happening. She smiled at me as if nothing was wrong, as if the life we built together hadn't just been dragged through the dirt. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. The woman I had sacrificed everything for was no longer mine, not even in memory. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength it takes to walk away from betrayal, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this aren't just stories. They're reflections of real lives, real pain, and real healing. I had spent 12 years building a life with her. 12 years of early mornings, late-night worries, shared dreams, and quiet victories that only we understood. We weren't perfect, but we were real, or at least that's what I believed. I worked long hours, sometimes missing dinners, sometimes forgetting anniversaries, but never, not once, did I stop loving her. I trusted that love was enough to hold everything together. But somewhere along the way, she had stopped believing that. She said she needed a break, a vacation to find herself. I didn't question it. Maybe I should have. Maybe love had made me blind, or maybe I just didn't want to see what was right in front of me. I helped her pack, kissed her goodbye, and told her to enjoy herself. I remember standing at the door watching her leave, thinking this time apart might bring us closer. Instead, it tore us apart in a way I never imagined. Days passed, then weeks. Her calls became shorter. Her texts became colder. There was always noise in the background, laughter, unfamiliar voices, a life I wasn't part of anymore. I ignored the knot in my stomach and told myself I was overthinking. I told myself that love required patience. Then she came back, not alone. She walked in like a stranger visiting someone else's home, her suitcase rolling behind her, her eyes avoiding mine just long enough to tell me everything I needed to know. Behind her stood a man, confident and relaxed, and his family chatting as if they had every right to be there, as if this house, my house, our house, was just another stop on their journey. That was the moment something inside me shifted. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She simply existed in front of me with a truth so loud it didn't need words. And strangely, I didn't ask questions, because deep down, I already knew the answers. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room, staring at the walls that held our memories. Every photo, every piece of furniture, every corner whispered stories of a life that no longer existed. I realized something painful but freeing. I had been holding on to something that had already let go of me. And that's when I made a decision that would change everything. Over the next few days, while she stayed distant and emotionally absent, I began quietly taking control of my life again. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of survival. I met with a lawyer. I reviewed our finances. I looked at every asset we owned together, the house, the car, the investments, even the small things we once picked out together with excitement. Piece by piece, I began to untangle myself from her. I sold what I could legally sell. I transferred what was rightfully mine. I made sure everything was done properly, cleanly, and without drama. It wasn't about hurting her. It was about protecting myself, about reclaiming the dignity I had lost the moment she walked back into my life with someone else's world attached to her. Every signature felt like a quiet goodbye. Not just to her, but to the man I used to be, the man who believed love alone could fix everything. It wasn't easy. There were moments I broke down, moments I questioned if I was doing the right thing. But each time, I reminded myself of that day, of the way she stood there, surrounded by people who didn't belong in our story, as if I had already been erased. That pain became my clarity. Within weeks, everything changed. The house was no longer ours. The life we built together had been carefully dismantled, not destroyed in anger, but released with intention. I didn't leave her with nothing, but I also didn't leave myself with nothing. For the first time in years, I chose myself. I moved into a smaller place, quiet, simple. Simple. It didn't have the history or the warmth of my old home, but it had something more important. It had peace. No memories echoing through the walls, no reminders of broken promises, just a clean slate. And in that silence, I began to heal. At first, healing felt unfamiliar, like learning how to breathe again after being underwater for too long. I had to rediscover who I was without her. What I liked, what I wanted, what made me feel alive. I started doing things I had forgotten I loved. Long walks, reading late into the night, reconnecting with old friends I had drifted away from. Slowly, the heaviness lifted. I realized something powerful. Losing her didn't destroy me. It revealed me. There's a difference. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and orange, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Gratitude. Not for what happened, but for what it taught me. I learned that love without respect is empty. That loyalty isn't optional. That sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't to hold on, but to let go. And most importantly, I learned that my worth was never tied to someone else's ability to see it. Months later, I heard through mutual friends that things hadn't worked out for her. The life she chose over ours wasn't as perfect as it seemed. The man, the family, the laughter, it all faded. And for a brief moment, I wondered if she would come back. But I didn't wait, because by then I had already moved forward, not into another relationship, not into another dependency, but into myself. I had built a life rooted in self-respect, peace, and clarity. I no longer needed someone else to validate my existence. I had become whole on my own. If this story is touching your heart, take a moment to engage with it. Like the video, share it with someone who might need to hear this and let your voice be part of this journey. And here's a special request. Before we reach the end, comment the word "strong" if you believe in rising after being broken. Because strength isn't about never falling. It's about rising every single time you do. In the end, I didn't lose everything. I lost an illusion, and in its place, I found something real myself. I learned that sometimes the most painful endings are actually the beginning of something far more meaningful. That walking away isn't weakness, it's courage. And that even when life shatters your heart, you still have the power to rebuild it stronger than before. So if you're watching this and you're going through something similar, remember this: you are not alone, and you are not powerless. You have the strength to choose yourself, to protect your peace, and to create a life that doesn't depend on someone else's presence to feel complete. And maybe, just maybe one day you'll look back and realize that what felt like the end was actually your beginning. The truth is, healing didn't arrive all at once. It didn't knock on my door like a miracle or wrap everything in a perfect cinematic ending. It came slowly, quietly, in moments so small I almost missed them. And if part one was about survival, then this was about becoming someone new. Me. Because after the silence, after the paperwork, after the empty rooms, there was still me. At first, mornings were the hardest. I would wake up and instinctively reach to the other side of the bed, only to find cold sheets and a reality I still wasn't fully used to. There was no one to ask how my day would be, no shared coffee, no familiar rhythm of a life built together. Just stillness. And in that stillness, memories had a way of creeping in, uninvited, persistent, and heavy. But instead of running from them, I started facing them. I let myself feel everything I had buried: the anger, the humiliation, the confusion, the grief of loving someone who had chosen to walk away without looking back. I stopped pretending I was fine and allowed myself to be honest for the first time in years. And strangely, that honesty became my strength. Weeks turned into months, and I began rebuilding. Not the life I had lost, but a life I had never allowed myself to live. I started taking care of my health, going for long runs at sunrise, feeling my lungs burn and my heart race in a way that reminded me I was still alive. I changed the way I dressed, not to impress anyone, but to feel comfortable in my own skin again. I even picked up old passions I had abandoned: writing, photography, things that once made me feel like more than just a provider, more than just a husband. I was becoming me again. And then one day, something unexpected happened. I ran into her. It wasn't dramatic. No storm, no music playing in the background. Just a quiet afternoon at a grocery store, of all places. I was standing in the aisle, comparing brands of coffee, when I felt a familiar presence beside me. When I turned, there she was. But she wasn't the same woman who had walked back into my life months ago with confidence and indifference. This version of her looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally. Her eyes didn't carry that same certainty anymore. There was something else there, something fragile, red. We stood there for a moment, two people who once shared everything, now separated by choices that could never be undone. She tried to speak, but the words seemed to get lost somewhere between her heart and her lip. And for a brief second I saw it, the version of her I used to love, the one who once believed in us. But I didn't move closer. I had learned something important. Not every apology deserves a second. She eventually found her voice telling me things hadn't worked out, that she had made a mistake, that she didn't realize what she had until it was gone. The kind of words that once would have shattered me, but now felt distant, like echoes from a life I no longer lived. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. I had already forgiven her. Not for her sake, but for mine. I didn't carry anger anymore. I didn't feel the need to prove anything. I wasn't looking for closure because I had already created it myself. So I listened quietly, respectfully, and then I did something I never thought I would be strong enough to do. I let her go. Completely. No dramatic goodbye, no harsh words. Just a calm, steady acceptance that our story had ended long before that moment. I wished her well, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. And then I walked away. Not broken, not angry, but free. Oh, and that night I sat by my window again, just like I had months ago. The same sunset painted the sky, but this time it felt different. Lighter, warmer. Like the world was no longer something I had to endure, but something I could finally enjoy again. If you've made it this far and this story has touched even a small part of your heart, take a moment to comment, and share it. Someone out there might need this reminder that healing is possible, that strength is real, and that letting go can be the beginning of something beautiful. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Moving on isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without pain. It's about looking back and seeing not just what you lost, but what you gained. The lessons, the growth, the quiet resilience you didn't know you had. And sometimes it's about opening your heart again, not to the past, but to the future. A few months later, I found myself sitting in a small cafe, working on my laptop, completely lost in a project I had poured my heart into. It wasn't just work, it was purpose. Something I had built from scratch, something that belonged only to me, and that's when she walked in. No, not my past. Someone new. She wasn't extraordinary in the way movies describe beauty. She didn't walk in slow motion or command the room. But there was something about her presence. Calm, genuine, real. She smiled at the barista, thanked them with a warmth that felt rare. And when our eyes briefly met, there was no spark of desperation, no rush of emotion, just possibility. I didn't rush, I didn't chase. I simply allowed life to unfold the way it was meant to. Because for the first time, I wasn't looking for someone to complete me. I was already whole. So if you're watching this holding on to something that's already gone, waiting for someone who's already chosen a different path, ask yourself this: how much of your life are you willing to give to someone who couldn't see your worth? Because the moment you choose yourself, everything changes. Before we end, here's something special. Comment I choose me if you're ready to let go of what's hurting you and start your own journey forward. And remember this: sometimes the person who breaks your heart unknowingly sets you free. And when you finally step into that freedom, you don't just find happiness, you find yourself.